Welcome to the Care Living podcast, brought to you by the Staying Close team. This is the space where we share stories, spark conversation, and explore the journey from care to relevance. Let's get started.
Imagine you wake up one morning and you are the UK Prime Minister. You're in for the post for a day and you can't refuse. What's the first thing that you would do?
Oh, that's such a difficult question. I've been asked this question a lot of times because I've always had a massive interest in politics, as you know, Beverly. What I do for a day? I think the main issue right now that I'm also feeling as a care leaver is the inflation. So I would either put a freeze or find a way to reduce the electricity bills, the water bills, utility bills, and also put a cap on how much rent should be in London.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And if there was one last thing that you'd like to do to improve the lives of care leavers, what would that be?
There's just so many things. It's hard to kind of encapsulate it as just one thing. So I would say better education for when you leave care. So better support in terms of to save money, because the statement when I was younger was, when you leave care, you're not going to get as much support, which is true. But I think for myself, I'm very fortunate that I have an amazing support system that Beverly knows of very well, and one of them being herself. So I might not necessarily struggle as a young person who's left care, that might not have that extra support. That support for me looks like financial support, emotional support, talking. So I think it would just be education around how to be an adult. Yeah.
So what is the most scary thing about becoming an adult or independent?
I was thinking this last night because I knew I would be coming here to talk about it. But one of the main scary thing is actually realizing that you're an adult. Because even though I'm 22, turning 23 next week, it's just the idea that I'm still young, but I don't have the privilege of being young. That's the reality of it, because my friends, they have a privilege it's no fault of their own, where they get to save the income and the money they have and go on nice, lovely holidays. While for me, I'm thinking about how am I going to make rent this month, but also how am I going to pay for my travel, and then pay for my utility, then pay for my phone bill, and then expect to have some money left over to do nice things. When in reality, I don't have that. So I'm constantly feel like I'm drowning in debt or drowning in it. I feel like I'm surviving rather than living, which is unfortunate. And I feel like a lot of care leavers may feel that way.
So apart from the person that you mentioned that was there for you, who else was there for you? And who is the most trusted person that you can now count on?
I don't know if you'd be comfortable with me saying his name, but he, where I was living, our relationship grew, so it wasn't something that clicked straight away. He's been really, what's the word? Like, he's just cared so much, and he's never given up on me, despite my attitude at times, despite my outbursts and my behaviors, sometimes my outlandish behavior when I was a teenager. So I think he gives me that emotional support. He gives me that space to be able to grow and learn. And now he's one of the best people. Bev knows this. I love him so much. Yeah. And it's grateful to have him as a father figure as well.
So would you say that St. Christopher's and Staying Close has helped you in any way?
When I was staying close, I never really had the experience that I do now living independently. When you live independently, now you're going to be in charge of all these bills, because if you make a certain amount of money or you make a certain threshold, now it's your responsibility to pay all those bills. And on top of that, if you haven't completed school and you want to go back to school as a care leaver, it's going to look really difficult for you. So do you want to stay here for a bit longer and figure out and save some money? Because when you move out, you get a £2,000 grant. Bear in mind, I didn't have flooring. the walls were cracked, and everything was a shamble. £2,000 just managed me to get a bed and white goods. That was it. And there was this false doctrine that having your own place is something to strive for. Actually, no, what to strive for is to save money, to get your education, because those things are actually going to help you better yourself in the future. And that means I get to position myself in a comfortable position, which I wasn't. So now I have to rely on the little support that I'm getting, which is almost to nothing. Yeah.
So in a way, we should, or staying close should represent a life skills.
Just the reality of it. You have a home, don't you? You pay your bills, whether you've mortgaged it or not. We all have responsibilities, and the reality is, yes, young people, they have emotional distress because they don't have their parents, but sometimes you're going to have to put that aside and really talk to them about the reality of the world, which is, if you don't have money to pay your bills, you're going to be homeless, as simple as. Like, we're all one step away from being evicted, especially if you're renting.
But what would that look like? I mean, as somebody who works in residential care, how can I create a space to have that conversation with a young person as a teenager? Think back to when you were a teenager and what it was like trying to communicate with you. What advice would you give to the professionals that work with teens to broach that subject about real life? Because as a teen, you're living your real life. So
yeah, but then the reality is that you have to take into consideration that you're dealing with teenagers, because the way you would talk to your teenagers, you can't talk to me that way, but that's how I want to be spoken to. But then the difference is your teenagers get to live at home and come back home if they need anything, but my reality is actually, no, I've only got one option and I have to make that option work. So the real problem is actually on a bigger scale, rather than just you individually. It's like, should I realistically have left 18, I've got my own place because I never absconded, I never done anything promiscuous, I was very well behaved, etc. But the reality is, despite not being a promiscuous or somebody that does things out of the norm, I still shouldn't have left at 18 years old to have our own place. I'm really sorry. The highlight is not having your own place. The highlight is to be able to maintain the place that you have. And I really think that young people in care shouldn't be given their own properties at the age of 18. It should be at least minimum 22, 23. When you've accumulated some money, you've had the chance to save. 17 to 18.
Right, the life experience. Yeah.
It's daunting for anyone.
Yeah. So what would you wish, looking back, I mean, you've got really good, you're in a good space where you can be reflective of your experience, but people listening might be at the front of that as like a late teen, What would you wish that they should be told at the start of their journey?
The start of your journey is, I think, for any care leaver, my main massive advice would be education. Please, if you don't go to university, get your GCSEs and get your BTEC course. At least that, or your A-levels. Get the minimum. So if you do later decide that you want to go to university to pursue something, it's easier. That whole transition is easier. And the next thing is, I am begging of you, save money. Save something, because it's going to be difficult. Inflation's high. I did grocery shopping, bought 10 items that cost me £50. So I'd say education and put some money aside. Have fun a little bit later, but just put some money aside.
So on the other side of that, then, if you had a chance, what would you like to say to those decision makers who have the power to make the care experience better for children and young people?
I would say rent, even though it might you might live in a council or housing association, and I know that they're already naturally reduced rental prices from a private. I still feel like they should be even more reduced for care leavers, just maybe up until 25, just like some local authorities, they don't allow their care leavers to pay council tax up until 25. I think that should be applied as well as a care leaver, just to help them bridge that gap. Because from like 18 to 25, you're still figuring out your career, you're still in academia, you're either finishing university, so you're not making the money that you should. But then if that rent is reduced, they also have breathing space, breathing room to go to the cinema or go on holiday or do something once a year. But unfortunately, that's not the case.
Okay, so imagine you work in residential care and you're trying to do the best for a young person. Are there any particular ways in which you would address the independence life to survive?
Like I said earlier, it's really difficult because what you want is an adult response from a child, and I think that's really difficult. Children or teenagers at that age, they want to talk about boys, girls, they want to talk about going out, they want to talk about what GCSEs they're going to take, or actually what A-levels they're going to do, not. So how can we talk about paying utility bills? That's really nice, isn't it? Really great setup. So it's quite discouraging, but I think, like I said, it's not so much about support workers or people that work on ground level. I keep on saying it's on a bigger scale. It's what can St. Christopher's as a whole, or what can these companies and these organisations do to work with looked after children that are transitioning. The first thing was explaining in detail, just talking about it, like whether they listen or not. You've done your due diligence, you've done your steps, you've told them directly and explicitly. When they move out, maybe find some sort of, as a company, a interest.
Right, so we have, St. Christopher's recently did a project about financial literacy.
Yeah.
And that was talking about, it's a resource that helps support workers talk about real life in the homes. So things like utilities. What are the bills that you would be expected to pay for? And there's not a long list, but this resource helps to put it in situ in the actual personal situation that they're living in. So, for example, we have foster carers on this course, and it allows foster carers to actually talk to young people who live in their homes about what it takes to run a home. So if they get pocket money, maybe £10, they'll maybe say to them, well, of that £10,
can we save
some of that for a rainy day? And what does a rainy day mean? A rainy day is when you sit back and you think, oh, I would really like a nice pair of trainers, or I would like that designer top that I've seen. So they're working towards saving for something that's far bigger than the day. The snacks for the day.
Far bigger than right now.
Right. Things like applying for driver's license. That costs. So it's having those kind of conversations. I mean, I remember when you were a teenager, we were talking about you wanting to learn to drive. We do have a fund within St. Christopher's that young people can apply for to be able to get driver's license, to be able to pay for a provisional license. Do you think St. Christopher's is going in the right direction?
Do they even have that scheme anymore?
Yes.
Oh, they still do have it?
Yes.
Oh, that's impressive. I think things like that are great. I think they're great incentives, but that's driving is a luxury rather than a necessity, especially living in London. So that's not really what we should strive for. I think if you're living in the home, in the care home, and you're 17 or you're living in a semi-independent, then yes, absolutely get that. It's great. It's free. Why not utilize the incentive or the benefits that you get from being in care? But I think it's the young person and the young person who they're working with to really look through, get an advocate, get maybe a pamphlet, go online and see what their policies are and what young people need.
So do you think maybe a care leavers toolkit might help? And that toolkit, it's a bit like a toolbox. In a toolbox you'd have screwdrivers, you'd have screws, you'd have a drill. For a care leavers toolkit, they would have things like utilities. What are utilities? And what would you be expected to pay for? Whether it's water, light, heating, gas. Those are the things that run a children's home. So maybe having those conversations in the residential meetings, do you think that might be helpful?
Absolutely.
So that they understand we're not just sitting under a roof for free.
I think you should embed that like from as young as 12, as young as 13. Time flies. I think once they start understanding things like, financial literacy, and they understand the importance, the significance of paying bills, and it's actually not something that you can dismiss, because the dismiss means that you're going to be evicted and eviction means you're going to be homeless. So absolutely. And then when they leave, maybe help them set up a direct debit. the people they're working with. Let's set up a direct debit. Let's calculate how much you need. Okay, this is your rent is £900. Okay, fine. Your utility, your gas is 160. Your water's what, 60, £70. You put that. It's a lot of money actually. Yeah, and then you pay. I do now.
So creating opportunities where they can better understand how to manage money.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
How to manage finance.
Yeah, and also when they're looking for a property, that's another thing. Look for a property that's affordable. Look for a property, if you can get a property that really has flooring in it, go and examine the property with your social worker or with the person that's supporting you, so that there's no problems with the bathtub or wires hanging out and things like that. If they see it's bare and empty, also your local authority also has a duty of care for you. If they know that you don't have flooring and you can't afford it, somehow they should be able to support you with funding.
Yeah.
It's about being persistent as well, and having that adult, not saying that young people, at 18, yes, you're an adult, but you're not qualified and you don't have that much experience as someone that's a lot senior than you, that works in the industry or the organisation, so they can be your advocate. They can articulate a lot better than you can.
So advocacy probably is something that could be introduced from an earlier age.
Absolutely, yeah.
So it's almost like having a mentor.
You did that. Remember the issues that I was going through?
Yeah.
In council.
Yeah.
Luckily enough, so long story short, I had the same issues where I couldn't afford the flooring. Flooring's expensive, and bed and mattress, and you need to get quality things of this. So I had spoken to one of the directors and I had explained extensively, and I was part of the Labour Party, so I think because I was like part of that whole local thing, constituency, they were taking it a little bit more serious, and I had the Labour friends I'd made advocate on my behalf. So I said to her, could you write everything you said, all the promises you've made, in writing? So she wrote it all in writing. 2 years down the line, nothing had happened. So luckily I was talking to Beverly about this. She said, oh well, would you call an advocate? Call an advocate. I've had this advocate for a year. So now I've got my flooring, I've got my bed, I've got everything. So I think that's the important thing. It's about young people. It's not just about talking, it's about having it in writing. And that's the biggest lesson that I've learned, is never leave anything undocumented, ever. Whether it's in employment, anything, have it documented. Save your back. Yeah.
Hence the reason why education.
Is important.
Learn to write, learn to read.
Absolutely.
Learn to have those communication skills to be able to understand where you sit in that framework as a care leader.
Yeah, because I feel like I've been taken advantage of, because I've had a lot of jobs back and forth. Some being because I couldn't just emotionally regulate myself. That's another thing. We're not taught to, carers are not gonna, your jobs are not gonna give you the same grace as your carers will, because your carers are paid to do a job, and they're expecting you to behave a certain way. Where your employment, they can just fire you.
Well, at St Christopher's we have a wraparound team, and that's the therapeutic team where there are therapists there for staff and for young people.
Yeah.
So if a young person is really struggling with emotionally regulating themselves, the therapist that's assigned to that service is available to have maybe talking therapy with that young person to help them get through challenges or difficult situations.
Yeah.
So there are many things that we as an organisation, a charity, have learned from young people like yourself because of the Staying Close project. Because the experiences that you're going through, I'm able to now bring that back to base and to be able to help build more firmer foundations as a stepping stone for young people to have a reasonably, it's always going to be challenging because life is challenging, right? But just a reasonable transition from children's homes into supported accommodation into semi-independence.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.